morning and welcome back to today's edition of our daily devotion. This morning we're going to be in Psalm number 24 as we continue to walk our way through the book of Psalms. While you're finding your way there, just a quick reminder, not this Sunday night because this Sunday is Father's Day, but the following Sunday night we'll begin our Sunday night adult Bible study. We'll finish up our study of church history the very first week, and then the following weeks right after that, Chris will lead us through a study of Habakkuk. And then shortly after that, Tim Runyon will lead us through another Bible study for 4 weeks as well. No children's activities yet. We really can't justify bringing them back in and locking them into a small room with a handful of adults where the germs might be spread more easily. But so far, the children have been doing wonderful in worship, and we were glad to see them on Sunday mornings. We're grateful for their parents who are able to come out, bring them out, teach them how to worship in a corporate gathering, and to be part of the larger church body. But this morning, as I said, Psalm number 24. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and those who shall dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of God of Jacob. Lift up your heads, O gates. Be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates. Lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Perhaps you noticed again a recurring thought embedded in this short little psalm. As we've seen now as we've been reading these more closely together now for a few months, how intimately they are related to one another, how they borrow thoughts and themes from ones that have come earlier, how ideas keep coming back. Same thing here this morning. But the idea of this psalm overall, the large idea, the big picture, is that of worship. We exist to worship. We are saved to worship. We're called together to worship. Everything in creation points to that. And that's where David begins this psalm. The earth, he says, is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. In other words, everything in it belongs to God. The world, and now notice the switch as you look at verse 1, the personal pronoun becomes human, and those, not that, but those who dwell therein. And so not only the world, the physical stuff, but the humans as well. For he has founded it upon the seas, and he's established it upon the rivers. In other words, the world belongs to God because he made it. Notice how often in the Old Testament the authors keep coming back to this notion of the creation as proof of who God is, and what it desires, or what it is ultimately created for, is to turn our attention to God. In verse 3, David then asks a question he's asked already in this psalm. In fact, he began the book of Psalms with this very thought. Who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord? Who shall climb up to Mount Zion? He's thinking in terms of where he wanted to build the temple there in Jerusalem. Who will come up to worship God? Who shall stand in his holy place? Who can enter into the presence of the Lord? Who can stand secure, safe that God will not destroy them in the judgment? But ultimately, again, in light of the overall theme of this psalm, who can come in worship? The answer is given in verse 4. It's he who has clean hands and a pure heart. Hands, what we do; heart, what we think and feel. Who does not lift up his soul to what is false. We don't bow down to lies and falsehoods. That's why we need to be so careful these days on social media particularly, but even the radio and talk shows, that we don't buy into everything that agrees with what we think is the right truth and be led away by it. We buy into all kinds of crazy rumors and false rumors. Those who are of the Lord's don't lift up their soul to what is false, nor do they swear deceitfully. Our yeses are yes, our noes are noes. People of God are people of truth. He says in verse 5, will receive the blessing from the Lord. What is that blessing? He doesn't spell it out specifically, but the fact that the rest of verse 5 goes into spiritual matters tells us we're not talking about physical things so much as we're talking about spiritual matters. He will receive the blessing from the Lord, and, it says in the middle of verse 5, righteousness from the God of his salvation. God will give us righteousness. He'll make us righteous. That is, remember Genesis 15:6, when Abraham believed the Lord, it was counted to him as righteousness. In other words, God treated him as if he was righteous. But one day, David promises us, we will in fact receive righteousness from God. We will be made righteous. As John has said in 1 John, one day we'll see Jesus as he is because we'll be like him. We'll be made righteous. Who can have this? How do we find it? That's found in verse 6. Such is the generation of those who seek him. It doesn't happen to those who are running away from God. It's those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob. And so it's those who turn to God, those who come in faith, those who come in obedience. And then what's the response to all this? That's found in the rest of the psalm. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors. The same thought that will be repeated again a little later in verse 9 introduces this chorus, if you will, this section of praise. Lift up your heads, O gates, be lifted up, O ancient doors. Why? Verse 7, that the King of glory may come in. So here it is to prepare, to open our hearts, open our doors, open the way, if you will, for God to be glorified in our lives. And so lift up your heads, O gates, be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Now, who is this King of glory, he asks in verse 8? It's the Lord, it's Yahweh, the God of the covenant. He is strong and mighty, powerful, omnipotent. The Lord, mighty in battle. And so here's a psalm focusing on the strength and power of God. He owns the world, and now here he is mighty in battle. Then he repeats himself, as I said, to close the chorus, the kind of inclusio, as they say in poetry. Lift up your heads, O gates, lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. And again, he asks rhetorically, verse 10, just as he asked at the beginning of verse 8, who is this King of glory? It's the Lord of hosts. The host, of course, is the heavenly army, the angels, the thousands upon thousands, the myriads upon myriads. He's the Lord of hosts. He, that one, is the King of glory. And so this morning we think about who we worship. We worship the Creator God, the one who brings salvation, the one who is strong and mighty, the one who will win and be victorious. How can we do it? We have to enter into his courts with praise, as the psalm says elsewhere, but we come after him, we seek him, and those who find him receive blessing and righteousness. We're saved. We can stand boldly in his presence, in the presence of this mighty warrior, because we'll be treated as his allies, as his friends. And who is he? He's the King of hosts. He is the King of glory. Let's not forget this week to worship God, to look around the world around us, look at the creation, notice what God has done and give him the praise for it, whether it's from the smallest thing like an ant to the biggest thing like our salvation. Let's never forget that the God we worship day in and day out, is not the God of Sunday morning only. He's the God who created the universe, who rules it like a mighty king, who has the power to subdue it, and who welcomes us like a loving father. Let's give him the worship. Let's give him the glory. And let's remember that's why we've been created. Until next time, may God bless you.